Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and is now bitterly regretting having a fiver on San Marino to score against England. I'm Kevin Day, he is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, we both have a soft spot for the underdog, don't we? I think I've seen more Liechtenstein games than most people in Liechtenstein, which is one, actually. But although being part Irish, Luxembourg, do they Luxembourg count as a minnow?
Well, if they count as a minnow, I hate to think what the Republic of Ireland count of us anymore.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, that wasn't a good result, was it? There were several family WhatsApp groups. I was just sitting there minding my own business, completely forgotten there was a game last night. And what's all that? What's that angry pinging going on in my family WhatsApp group? Oh dear, really? It's questions day, Kieran, but we're not sticklers for tradition here. So we also have an interview with Martin Searle, who's a director of Chippenham Town of the National League South, a level of football at which shenanigans, shall we say, continue. He's also a Palace fan, that may get mentioned. But before that, Kieran, some questions. And we start with Toby Bowles. And Toby says, in December, Farhad Moshiri bought another £250 million worth of shares in Everton. And it was explained in various media outlets that his ownership of the club rises to 93% as a result. Surely, though, he says, the other shareholders would have had to agree with him buying the shares, as it wasn't their shares he was acquiring. And if so, why would they agree to it?
Well, the reason why they'd agree to it, because it actually benefits Everton Football Club. I managed to find a complete list of shareholders of the football club, and there are 2,067, according to my list, most of whom have one or two shares. So it's a shareholding that's being bought out of affection and love for the club. Everton's constitution allows it to increase the number of shares, and they were being sold for £3,000 each. So if you are an existing shareholder of Everton, what's the benefit of buying one of those additional shares if it's going to cost you $3,000? It's never going to pay out a dividend if we're realistic. You've already got that share certificate up on your wall in your bedroom, in your bog, in your in the kitchen, and wherever it's going to be, as a reminder of your commitment and love for the club. And Moshiri says, I'm quite happy to put in effectively, an extra 200 million quid, half of which was fresh cash, half of which is existing loans, which he's writing off and converting into shares. And the club is also allowed to issue some more shares, which could potentially bring in another £100 million. So these shareholders, in theory, could have gone ahead and tried to buy some of the shares, but there would be no financial benefit to them. And you've got somebody who is a squillionaire who is willing to bankroll the club. He's already put in around about 400 million in total. So I think they just said, just get on with it, because whether you own one share or two, compared to the number of shares that Moshiri already owns, and he before this share announcement, he owned over 70%, it's not going to change your power. And therefore there was no benefits for the individuals concerned.
Squillionaire, is that technically a correct term?
I saw it on a cartoon, so it's got to be true. So it's on television.
Oh,
everything that's on true is that everything that's on telly is true, isn't it?
So you've ruined my plan now, because I've literally, as you said that, I've written down rich squirrel and then cartoon idea ? I'll do that whilst paying attention to the answers, by the way, Kieran, just so you know. Leslie Ackley has a question about the ownership of grounds. And Leslie points out quite rightly that over recent months, we've mentioned a number of clubs who sold their home grounds, effectively losing control of the stadium, in particular Coventry and Sheffield Wednesday. And Leslie says, remembering the problems Simon Jordan had at Crystal Palace in order to reacquire Selhurst Park from a previous chairman, is this not a dangerous road for clubs to take, even if it provides short-term funding? Because, of course, Ron Nodes sold Selhurst Park to Mark Goldberg, but he sold the leasehold, not the freehold, and then Simon Jordan was ended up owning the leasehold, not the freehold, so it caused all sorts of problems.
Yes, I think we've said on more than one occasion on the show that a football stadium does place a particular place in your heart as a football fan, and it should be a protected asset. Palace have had their problems. Again, looking at my club, Brighton, we own the Goldstone. You've said similar about Selhurst. It may be a bit of a shithole, but it's our shithole, and that's part of why we love it. We ended up spending 2 years at Gillingham. We then spent 12 years at an athletic track for somewhere which was not suited for football. Coventry have been bouncing around at Northampton and Birmingham, and it does look now that they are returning to the Rico, which is good news. But even so, there will be limits as to what they can do in terms of the way the stadium is run. I've been doing a lot of work with West Ham fans recently, and a lot of people say, "Well, let's compare West Ham to Spurs." Both stadiums are around about 60,000 capacity. Why is it that Spurs are generating so much more money? Well, Spurs are able to use the stadium to generate money 365 days a year. For West Ham, who are tenants, they can use it for 25 to 30. So it does restrict a club's ability to generate revenue. It does restrict what the clubs can do in terms of if you want to increase the number of seats, if you want to go and change the colour of the walkways and things as simple as that. It's exactly the same as if you're talking about private properties. What you can do as a tenant compared to what you can do as an owner are vastly different.
Yeah, I may admit to other Palace fans, Kieran, that Sellers Park was a shithole, but I don't think I would say it to the likes of you, would I? Have I ever said that? Is Finley all right? What's he barking at?
There's a helicopter going overhead, which I think has probably got the wrong members of the family that they're spying on.
It definitely won't be a police helicopter flying over your neck of the world, unless somebody's trespassing in the vineyard, Kieran. Our next question comes from Jerry Pruitt. Hang on a second, Kieran, bear with me. Cockney feet mark the beat of history. Every street pins a memory down. Nothing ever can quite replace the grace of London town. Jerry accused me of being London-centric last week, and I didn't want to disappoint him, basically. Stick that in your regional pipe, Jerry. Jerry says that Kieran mentioned on a recent pod that the majority of company accounts at Companies House are not audited. As a former internal auditor, says Jerry, I was stunned by this. Basically, without audit, you can submit any old figures with nothing to back them up. I know that even audited accounts can still be economical with the truth, but at least someone qualified has put their name to it. Do any Premier League or EFL clubs submit unaudited accounts?
All Premier League clubs publish audited accounts or send them in. Under Companies Act legislation, Companies Act 2006, if your sales are less than 10.2 million and you've got less than 50 employees, you've got the option of unaudited accounts. So this means that practically every club in the lower two divisions, except Sunderland, Ipswich and Pompey, satisfy these criteria. And we do see an awful lot of clubs take up this option. They will say, we're saving us money. We don't have to get the accounts audited. HMRC tends to be sort of more keen to investigate unaudited clubs, but given that they're all loss-making anyway, there's not a huge benefit there for HMRC. It is said that if you get an audit, you're higher up in terms of credit rating, but any lender who's not insane wouldn't lend to a football club anyway. So there's not huge benefits to the clubs themselves, except when you start to look at some of the unaudited accounts. And here I've managed to find the accounts of Oldham in 2018. And they sent in a set of accounts which were unaudited. And they said, we at the end of the season, we had cash of £261,000. Now, most of accounting stuff is just guesswork. But cash isn't. You and I both know how much money we've got in our bank accounts when we nervously open up those apps. And then a couple of months later, Oldham sent in a different set of accounts, and instead of having 261 grand in their bank account, they had 5. Now this is a bit like me coming home at 4 a.m. And the Baroness says, "Well, how much did you go and spend tonight?" And I say, "Oh, it was just a tenner." And then the following morning, she takes a look at the bank account, and I've taken out 300 quid 3 times or something. from a cash point. So it's very strange that clubs can't even get the amount of cash right in the accounts. And if they're unaudited, there's nobody checking them.
These are not just football rules. It's any business above or below a certain amount has to be audited. So these are general business HMRC laws, are they?
That's right. If you actually take a look, 99% of company accounts are unaudited.
Oh, really?
It's only the likes of Marks and Spencers and Vodafone and big successful companies like Manscaped who will actually go through the rigmarole of being audited because they're too big to slip through the rules.
Or the Financial Times, or I can't remember who's sponsoring this week. To be perfectly honest,
yes.
I've got my West Bank app saves me a lot of time. I just open it, it goes I don't even bother checking. I couldn't let this question go by, Kieran, without the 12-year-old version of Kevin Day saying, "Have you ever conducted an internal audit?"
No, I have done the external audit of many companies, including some football clubs.
Oh, I thought you'd go straight for a Moscow joke there, Kieran. But
I was trying to be.
No, it doesn't. I'm not going to let that happen, Kieran. I don't think we're being judged for any awards this week. It's fine. Our next question comes from Arna Marcus. Again, Arna, I apologise if I mispronounced that. But Arna says that AFC Wimbledon recently received a request to ground share with the London Broncos Rugby League Club. How much could we expect to earn from this?
Not a huge amount. I mean, I did take a look at the likes of Wasps, who I think were paying around about $500,000 a year at Wycombe. So that would have been quite high. But London Broncos have been bouncing up and down between the Championship and Super League as far as rugby is concerned. And given that they only had total income coming in of £1 million when they're in the Championship, I don't think it will be huge for AFC Wimbledon, but we're probably talking a six-figure sum.
Okay. Patrick Green tells us that he is an aspiring accountant currently working in a boring accountancy office.
That narrows it down.
And in brackets, he said, "Don't tell my boss." And in brackets, I thought, "We're not grasses." But also, we won't tell your boss, Patrick, but a lot of people listen to this pod. It could be, your boss could be one of them. Interesting question, though. Patrick says, does the unpredictability of the Premier League this season and the relative success of West Ham and Leicester and Southampton early on show that financial fair play is becoming a success in bridging the competitive gap, hence giving a huge incentive to run effectively and be frugal to a degree like Spurs have done recently, although Spurs haven't actually won anything, so that damages the argument a little bit.
I think we are in an unusual season. If we take a look, I think 9 of the last 10 FA Cups have been won by clubs in the so-called Big Six, Greedy Six, as we prefer to refer to them. If we take a look at the Premier League, 27 out of 29 have gone to, again, those clubs. In fact, have gone to 5 clubs because Spurs are the Greedy Six, but they're not big unless you assume that winning trophies is not big, and it's not clever. And the Carabao Cup, it's 14 out of the last 16 have gone again to that same group of clubs. So I think it's a change in our psyche because you and I, Kevin, we're both old enough to remember Derby County, Nottingham Forest, Blackburn Rovers, Leeds United, Aston Villa, Everton, all winning the top tier of English football. And we just said, oh, they're the best team this season. And, therefore they deserve to win it, as opposed to the fact that they're the clubs which have got more money than anybody else this season. So therefore it's an inevitability that they're going to win it, or an almost inevitability. If you think that, 27 out of 29 Premier League titles, it's only, it's only Leicester who have sort of really changed things. And you've got to give them huge credit for that. So I think there's been a change in the mentality of us as football fans. We've been sort of browbeaten into thinking that richer equals better because they win more trophies. They're not better. They simply pay more wages. Football's a talent industry. And it's you work in a talent industry, and you know that there will be some people raking in huge sums and getting all the big tours. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're better, but it's there is very much a correlation between revenue being generated and the wages that these clubs can afford to go out, which gets turned into trophies.
That's interesting, that, because thinking about the 70s, which when Liverpool won the league every second year, none of us accused them of buying it. You just thought, well, they're a really good team, they've got a really good manager, and they get really good players in. So it's only really when the Premier League came along that you started to think, oh, Man United are the richest club, that's why they win. So that correlation between better and richer is a relatively new one, isn't it? That's an interesting point.
Yeah, but then in the if we go back to the 70s and 80s, there didn't used to be this huge difference. The income differential between a greedy six club and a non-greedy six club is £350 million a year on average.
Yeah,
that's a ridiculous amount. And that allows you to buy flops. If you take a look at Chelsea spaffed £250 million last summer on players who I think it's fair to say have been hit and miss, but you can afford more misses if you're a richer club.
Fair point. Luke Judson. So Coventry City have a loan deal with Arsenal for Ben Sheaf, with an obligation to buy for £750,000. Originally, though, the asking price was widely reported to be £900,000. Why would Arsenal reduce the fee? Does it mean Coventry have an excellent negotiator and Arsenal a poor one? Or, Luke, I suppose it could mean that the original reports were wrong.
Indeed, it could. I mean, I went here to the FIFA Global Transfer Market Report.
Did you?
Oh yes, yeah. A bit of nighttime talk between myself and the Baroness on that, as you can imagine. And it said that in 2020, on the back of COVID, the volume, i.e. the number of transfers, was down by 5%, but the value is down by 23%. So if we take a look at this from the interest of the three parties, first of all, Arsenal is a selling club. Ben Sheaf clearly has made an impression at Coventry, but I would suspect that Arsenal do not see him having a long-term future at the club. The overall value of transfers has come down. So that gives increased negotiating strength to the buyer, because it is a buyer's market at present. We've seen the collapse of the French transfer market because their TV deal has disappeared. We've just seen the Italian TV deal being announced last week. That's gone down in value. The Bundesliga's deal is down by 5%. So that's driving prices down across the whole of Europe. And this has allowed Coventry to say to Arsenal, well, yeah, originally we were talking 900 grand, but we could buy a similar player to Ben Sheaf for 750. Are you prepared to drop your price? And it looks as if Arsenal have turned around and have made that as a commercial decision.
James Dennis says, and I quote, I find it hard to read this out seriously, Kieran. I'm actually currently writing an essay about contracts in football for a university module. And I want to
doing his work for him.
I just like the idea that he's actually writing it as he listens. Just hang on a second, I'll just hear this. James wants to ask about the way players are paid. Players are mostly paid, of course, a fixed wage with maybe some individual bonuses, but should players be paid on team performance, like league and tournament wins, for example, with the money equally distributed based on minutes played?
If we actually do take a look at some contracts now, both of us have got to know one or two people in the industry, and you far more than I have. I occasionally get to see a contract, and they are heavily incentivized. The average wage in the Premier League is around about 50 grand a week. Clearly, some players are on considerably more than that, but there will be huge bonuses for a club such as mine. Surviving in the Premier League is worth an awful lot to players, and then there will be individual bonuses for team achievement. So that will be achieving a certain number of points. It's actually it's more closely linked these days to the final position that the club has in the table. And the reason for that is that each position is worth about just under an extra £2 million to the club. So the clubs are incentivised to do well. They pass on some of that to the players in terms of individual contracts. So it is very much team orientated. It will be also performance linked as well. And normally, if you're a regular starter, then the chances are you're going to be playing the majority of the matches. So there is very much a link. I've looked at the accounts of let's face it, every single football club and
in the world,
and some of the numbers are staggering. So I took a look at Manchester City's. It's got a little side note to the accounts, but that managed to come into my viewing. They have performance-related liabilities or obligations. Now, some of these will be to clubs, but most of these will be to players of £200 million.
Wow.
So, there's all this talk about the quadruple for Manchester City this season. Well, nobody's mentioning that if you go to page 38, note 23, or wherever it is, it could be that the players could have enormous benefits on a personal level in terms of financial. Ultimately, the players are there to win matches, and that's what motivates them. But having that as a backup, somebody or a group of people are going to benefit potentially from up to £200 million from Manchester City, part of which will be linked to the quadruple. Others will be for international caps and things of this nature. But it does have a huge impact upon the total wage bills and costs for clubs.
I think Martin Tyler is arguably the best commentator in the world, but even I can't see Martin Tyler saying, as City head for the quadruple, this is good news for those players with Section 23.8 in their contracts, isn't it? And yes, we do both know people in football, Kieran, but you know grown-ups, and I know people like Razor Ruddock, and he ain't showing me any contracts. Trust me. I did really, generally not showing me anything. Well, no, he is showing me anything, but it's mainly the last turkey in the shop. Now, this question, Kieran, it's not so much a question as a domestic, to be honest. This one.
Yes.
I don't know. Hugh Besant says that his son James is now 21. Congratulations. That when he was younger, he cost me at least £100 a season in fines for yellow cards. He's carried on this disciplinary shame in both county standard football and Sunday League. He's rarely nasty. He's not that sort of player, Kieran. He's just a combative midfielder who likes to put in a tackle. Hugh's question is, where do these fines go? And do professionals have to shell out £12 every time they get a yellow card as well? I don't know where to start unpacking issues in this question, Kieran. I think James maybe is seeking his dad's attention. I don't know, but it's a good question. Where does the money go?
Well, the money goes to the Football Association on a local level, and it is then used as part of the distribution. So it will go to helping out grassroots and things of this nature. But have you ever known a manager or somebody connected to a player to say that he is really nasty?
No, of course not. He's not one of those players. We know that.
No, you're friendly with Razor Ruddock. He was combative, to put it mildly. But was he nasty? No, he just liked kicking people.
Also, bizarrely, he liked kicking people and he liked being kicked. He also said he enjoyed the process of coming off the pitch in agony, which is a strange one. But yes, you're quite right. No, there aren't. Even at Sunday League, people used to say about me when I got another yellow card, it was always a classic, you got there as quickly as you could. There's a bloke being carried off over there because I got there as quickly as I could.
I never had a yellow card. Never had a yellow or red card.
That doesn't surprise me at all, to be perfectly honest. Because you never turned up for a game hungover for a start off, did you? You've never had that's nothing to boast about. You've never had a yellow or a red card. I got sent off twice in one match playing against the team. I did, yeah, playing against a team of priests. Genuinely, I got sent initially. I was sent off after 10 minutes because I went, Jesus Christ, ref, and the referee sent me off for profanity. And then I sneaked back on, and he realised 15 minutes later that I'd sneaked back on, and he sent me off again. But there you go. Yes, I'll tell you the reason I'm interested in this question, Kieran, and I would wonder if you could put a figure on it, because I did a podcast recently, a referees podcast, and they asked the same question. They asked me to ask you, in fact, so I'm glad that Hugh Besant raised this, because I was surprised to learn that there is no official kind of counselling or mentoring service for young referees. We know the sort of level of abuse they can get when they're starting out in a game, and indeed later on. And they wondered whether something similar, some kind of guidance and counselling could be paid for by fines for disciplinary breaches. But we couldn't work out what level of money we're talking about.
I know that the English FA, I think it has around about £13 million from what it calls other sources, which includes fines, but that tends to be when it fines clubs or it has separate hearings for players, and the players themselves, of course, get fined by their employer, depending upon the nature of the offence. So a lot of clubs take a very dim view of players getting fined for shouting rude stuff at the referee, because it's just a waste of a yellow card. If somebody's going through and you take him out, we all know. We say, we shouldn't condone it, but thank fuck for that.
It took one for the team.
So that there will be different approaches taken by teams, but I think as somebody that used to referee myself, and I gave it up. I'd reached the stage where I don't. If people want to F and Jeff at me, that's fine. But when it gets threats of physical violence from and it wasn't the players, it tends to be their family on the sidelines. You go, why am I doing this? It can be quite. I'm a fat so and so and 6'3" and so on, but I can look after myself. But even so, you think, well, this could get quite lively. I think referees do need far more support. They don't get enough, and you don't do it out of anything apart from love of the game.
Of course.
So you're not power crazy. I can assure you. I used to go to many referees meetings, and it was they were just as keen on football, because we used to play five-a-side. As part of our training.
All the referees I've met are obsessed with football. It's the only way they could find to get into the game. They all love the game. You know what you should have done, Kieran, when you were being abused by family members on the side? You should have marched up to them and said, "Excuse me, madam, as a player, I never received a yellow or red card." They would really have respected you for that.
Yeah. Now, actually, I should have pointed out to them who my Uncle Terry was.
That would definitely would have worked.
Uncle Terry, okay, right.
Uncle Terry was abusing the ref on the other pitch at the time. And this idea, it still makes me laugh, the idea of Sunday League players being fined, because I don't recall anyone ever paying it. I don't recall even knowing how to pay the fine or who to pay it to.
But it's the club secretary. The club secretary would be doing that.
We never had a club secretary. We had Roy. Who did everything. Roy was the manager. Roy was the manager and the captain. I don't know if this is the place to tell him this, but Roy was only the manager and the captain because he had a big washing machine. Sorry, I didn't want you to hear it like that, Roy. But basically, none of us could wash the kits, basically. But players individually are not fined. If a Premier League player gets a yellow card, he's not being fined by the FA for that individual yellow card, is he?
Officially, it is the individual player who is responsible for the fine, is my understanding. But normally the club secretary will organise this, and then it's up to them to determine whether or not they're going to recoup it from the player. I've tried to find this out, but I don't know how much it would be in the Premier League, because it is the Football Association that determines fines rather than individual divisions. So I don't think that it would necessarily be a huge amount unless they are up for particular charges, because you could have it will have to be a flat fee, of course. It wouldn't be linked to the player's wages. And remember, you've got 17 and 18-year-old apprentices sometimes getting a match towards the end of the season. They won't be on big money, especially if they're in the lower leagues.
Yeah. In the meantime, James Besant, if you are listening, seriously, rein yourself in. Come on. Stop putting these tackles in. You're breaking your dad's heart here and his wallet.
But he's not nasty.
No, of course he's not. We know that. He's a sweetheart. He's like Paul Scholes. It's just every now and again you can push these people too far. And we still have one more question to discuss, Kieran, and it's a goodie. But first, we have a chat with Martin Searle. And Martin is one of the directors of National League Club South Chippenham Town, and he wanted us to tell us about the latest developments in the ongoing row between the league and some of its own clubs. Martin, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate this. Before we discuss the latest twist in this unsavoury plot, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be a director at Chippenham Town FC, and what life has been like at that level of football in the last couple of months.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. I got involved in Chippenham Town. I was a season ticket holder anyway. And I got involved really sort of quite randomly. Sort of somebody contacted me via Twitter, who was one of the directors, and said, we need a COVID medical officer to start the season. And he knew I was a GP. And so I thought, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. And so it's a question of, as long as they paid my insurance, everything else was just me providing it for free. And it had to be done, otherwise they couldn't play fixtures, and so it was. So I can't say I've ever known normal times, and I feel a bit strange because I'm sort of most recent. Because I came as a COVID medical officer, but after a fairly short space of time, they made me a director as well, and I feel sort of almost like an innocent abroad, really, because I am say the most recently one in. But it's been a great privilege. It's been a great insight as well. But they've been very stormy times, of course. I mean, we had all the COVID policies to sort out. We managed to get one match actually with spectators on Boxing Day after getting through all the hoops and hurdles, and then everything shut down again. And then we're suddenly abroad in this financial mess. So it's been interesting times in that old cursed way. It's not been easy.
I imagine they're quite excited about having the spurious glamour of a Palace fan on the board, aren't they?
Just the thrill completely escapes them. Indeed, my fellow director, who I was doing stuff around the ground with, exactly at the same time as Palace were losing very heavily at home to Liverpool, and he is a plastic Liverpool supporter. He enjoyed every goal that was going in, and he got his notifications about 30 seconds before I did. So that was a wonderful afternoon.
He had 7 shots on target, Martin, and scored 7 goals. That's shocking. That's better than Brighton's expected goal.
We do things.
Martin, every story we've discussed about the National League this season has contained the word acrimonious. And this new development, I don't think it's going to do anything to help that. Talk us through what's happened this week.
Well, what's happened this week is the culmination of a process that started back in the beginning of February. Well, that's the culmination of a process that started really back in November. So if I just get down to what happened this week, what's happened this week was that we've had the verdicts on charges that were brought under Rule 8.39 of failure to fulfil fixtures, which we can go into details of if you want. But what's happened is that a number of clubs who felt they could not afford to play the fixtures. There was some, in some cases, there was the COVID worry as well, but probably it was financial. And because the what we felt were promised grants had not materialised in January and had become potential loans rather than grants, we had stopped playing fixtures. There had been a 2-week suspension of the National League, which overlapped with the commencement of the vote on the resolutions as to whether to make it null and void. But they resumed playing just without the vote having come back. So nothing actually having changed. So we could not afford to play the fixtures, and we were not the only club in that situation. So as a result, 16 clubs have been weighed off this week, all getting their verdicts simultaneously announced at a terribly interesting time of 5 o'clock on a Friday evening. We were all told early in the afternoon, but with an embargo of 5 o'clock, which some clubs chose to break, not us, but some clubs did. It did seem a bit like the National League had pressed a button and run away. And as you might imagine, things have erupted in quite the furore since. And where there was discontent before, there is uproarious discontent now.
Yeah, so I know that Dulwich Hamlet were fined £8,000 and given a suspended 8-point deduction.
Exactly the same as us.
Exactly the same.
Basically, it was the tariff that was used was, I mean, they were even-handed in their viciousness. It was basically £2,000 per charge, i.e. per fixture not fulfilled. And that was a bit luck of the draw how many you had in that period, really. We had 4 in that period. Dulwich had 4 in that period. Slough had 4 in that period. Some of the National League North teams had 4. And everybody had £2,000 for each fixture they hadn't turned up for. The points suspended hanging over us for next season. And there was some reduction. 2 of the clubs out of the 16 decided to basically plead guilty to the charge of failing to fulfil the fixtures without just cause. So they had a reduction of, I think, 30%.
30%, yeah.
And 2 of the clubs had extra charges of COVID breaches, and they got separate fines for that. But so basically 14 of the clubs were just straight 839 charges. Everybody apart from Dover Athletic, of course, was a separate case. So we're looking in our case at £8,000 fine, plus the £150 we paid for the a personal hearing. That didn't make any difference to the actual level of fine that was given out, because we're not prepared to plead guilty to the charge because we felt we had just cause to not fulfil the fixture.
Yeah, well, I'll come on to that, Martin, as well, because as you'll guess, we agree with you. But Kieran, just Dulwich Hamlet, Chippenham fined £8,000. Presumably, that will outweigh any cost that those clubs would have saved by not playing the games, will it?
In all probability, yes, because the clubs have taken advantage of the furlough scheme, so it has allowed them to save some money. But if you take a look at the National League's comments, it was, you as football clubs have done something to try to ensure your sustainability, your existence in the future. We don't like that, so therefore we're going to fine you for it. And it's completely ludicrous. The clubs in the National League, they're all losing money already. You can see why some clubs who have previously been in administration, they don't want to run the risk of that again, so therefore they're very keen to avoid debt. Yet the approach taken by the National League is it's beyond bafflement.
Yeah, we'll talk specifically about the National League's approach in a moment, but there's 2 details, Martin, I particularly want to confirm with you. In all the research I've done into this, and for once I did some proper research, I can't work out this.
I'm just getting back on my chair from having fallen off.
Don't you? I get enough of that from Kieran. Don't you start? From a Palace fan as well, man. That's shameful.
Shameful.
Yeah, do you know what? We'll make an important announcement at the end of this pod about a new Patreon service. And one of the suggestions was that producer guy said maybe the patrons could get a look at your script, and it's like, my what? The point deduction. No, you got a suspended 8-point deduction. I can't for the life of me find out when or where or what the circumstances would be of that deduction kicking in. Is it if you don't pay the fine? Is it if you don't
breach next year, the next season? I'm not sure if it's got the official wording in their verdict here. So that's actually the hearing one. But because somewhere here I have actually got the weighing off. But basically, it's if we breach 839 again next year, then the entire points deduction gets activated, which means that we have a Damoclean sword hanging over us, which I think is, well, some might feel that was part of their agenda. I mean, I couldn't possibly comment, as they say.
Well, we can, because it just seems that they're taking that Damoclean sword and driving it as a wedge between you and the other clubs in the league for a start off. But the second detail I don't quite understand, and the Evening Standard, who have been very good on the case of Dulwich Hamlet, the key words in there, the clubs, while they awaited confirmation of the season being suspended, the clubs didn't fulfil their fixtures. So they awaited confirmation. Everyone knew that the season was going to be suspended, so it made no sense to force clubs who couldn't afford to play, did it? I don't. That's the bit I really don't get about the National League's attitude.
I wouldn't say that we knew that it was going to be suspended. I mean, we were gradually coming to a conclusion that should be the way it went. It was the way we were hoping it was going to go. It was the way we had certainly voted. We didn't get the vote was announced on the 1st of February. That there would be a vote on what the resolutions were. The results were announced on the 18th. It was only when they were announced on the 18th we knew for sure they would be being made null and void. But it was becoming increasingly apparent that that was the likely outcome. But certainly it is true to say that we are being charged for not fulfilling fixtures that technically don't exist.
Yes, it's very
picturesque.
Isn't it just? We've already used a lot of references some of our listeners won't get, Martin. So.
Sorry, I've used 2 bad ones already. I do apologise.
That's fine. No, I get them. Kieran has them explained to him, but we talked about the National League's attitude. The bit that most annoyed me, Martin, is the National League trying to distance themselves from their own decision by constantly referring to the fact that it was the decision of an independent panel, and that the panel, and then also the worst bit, and then the panel expressed its sympathy with the club's predicament. Did that soften the blow for you at all?
Oh, no, it's lovely. Although, rather than sympathy, we could do with the money, to be honest. I mean, rather than be unsympathetic and not finest. One of the questions we would very much like, I would very much like an answer to, because I haven't seen anywhere it's been referred to, is how this independent panel was chosen. Yeah. I mean, there were 3 people in the panel. I've done some due diligence in the background as far as I can work out. There's one of them I can't really work out much about, but 2 of them come from a background of working in the FA and the judicial and administration side of things, which is, funnily enough, where the interim general manager just came from. So it basically, it could be thought that bloke ex-FA picks blokes from FA, but don't worry, if you don't like their outcome, you can appeal to the FA.
Yeah. It's gone from Pinter to Kafka now, isn't it? Kieran, the National League have got previous in this, haven't they, using independent panels and hiding behind that. The whole farrago about hiding the criteria by which the grant, loan, whatever it was called, was distributed, was put down to independent panel, and so they've done it before. It's the least people can expect is openness about who's made this decision and why they've made it, isn't it?
Yes, unfortunately, the National League has a track record of not disclosing the rationale behind decisions. So for those people not familiar with the payouts, the National Lottery agreed grants to the National League a few months ago with regards to loss of matchday income, and then the National League decided to use a completely different set of rules to work out the numbers involved, which caused a lot of unhappiness amongst clubs. It just doesn't seem to be an organisation which believes in governance and transparency, which at times like this makes it very, very, very indefensible.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the words governance and transparency, because governance and transparency are 2 of the things I really want to see playing out here, and I'm failing to see them. It has to be said, and that's one of my big asks out of all this. I mean, we will be appealing this verdict, and we will hope to come out of it with a good outcome. But to me, it is imperative that we start the next season with a clear business plan for the league, which includes the possibility of there being no spectators for a period of time somewhere in winter, when there will inevitably be some wave of some sort, and it depends how the government reacts to it. And we have to have a better plan. We have to have a more transparent, honest, and open plan than we had this time. We cannot be doing this, another season. It will kill the game. It will kill the clubs.
You talk about an appeal, Martin. You've been encouraged not to appeal by this offer of a 30% deduction.
No, we haven't had the 30% deduction. So because we didn't plead guilty in the first place.
Well, that was my point. You've been lured, or you've had the promise of a 30% deduction if you don't appeal.
No. That moment has gone. The 2 clubs who've had their 30% deduction, they can't appeal. I suppose they could appeal the verdicts, but it would be very silly of them to do so.
But that's something else in the research that I've done. There doesn't seem to be any mechanism for appeal. There's no talk about the fact that there is a right of appeal to this. So is there a right of appeal, or are you just assuming that you...
There is a right of appeal to the FA, but it's a one-line thing, and it doesn't say exactly how you do it. So we are looking into that now. I mean, from my rough calculations last night, as far as I could see from social media activity and club statements, there are at least 6 clubs who intend to appeal. There are 4 who are considering their options, because they've got to have due process meetings. In the case of Dulwich Hamlet, everything they do is run past a large body of their fans anyway.
Yeah.
There are 4 who are considering appealing and are very likely to. Two that can't appeal the verdict really, because they took the plea bargaining, as it were.
Yeah.
And there's 4 that are unknown. There's 3 clubs. I can't even work out who 3 of the clubs are.
Oh, really? So will you be appealing individually, or will you be getting together with the other clubs?
Well, this remains to be seen, I think. I mean, we have to press the button saying we're going to appeal. We've got a 14-day period to do that. But there will undoubtedly be conversations between the clubs as to whether this stage of the proceedings is best done with some at least degree of cooperation and information sharing between clubs. And then we have to consider our options in the event that the appeal to the FA is, as I somewhat suspect it would be, unsuccessful.
And what's been the attitude of the clubs that did fulfil their fixtures? Presumably, it's not a sympathetic one.
I don't think there's been any poison thrown around, to be honest. I think, unfortunately, they feel pretty sour as well, because quite a few of those then wanted to carry on playing, and those plans got stymied at FA level. But I don't necessarily think they were given the best shaping by the National League. So they're pretty cross about their own business, really, and we weren't getting upset about them wanting to carry on playing. So I don't think they got particularly upset about us not playing. I think there's a different level of activity in the top division. There's some real negative stuff being thrown around there, some nasty stuff, and being thrown mainly at Dover. And I think it's best to think of them as 2 separate entities, really, Tier 1 and Tier 2 for this. And in many respects they are, because Tier 1 is full of, big clubs, ex-Football League clubs, full-time clubs. We're full of, we are a part-time club. We run almost entirely on volunteers. And, every money, people say, oh, you had money to start the season, we had money per month to pay the bills per month. And when the money ran out, we had no money to pay the bills if we didn't shut down and furlough. So they are chalk and cheese. So we've had sympathy from the other clubs. I wouldn't say there's going to be anything more than sympathy, but we've certainly got a substantial body between us and the South, us and the National League North, to have a decent body of clubs who want to take this all a bit further.
Interesting, just in passing, what you mentioned about Dover, because I noticed that Sky, if you watch the results coming in on Sky, they waste no opportunity to have a go at Dover. And I can't quite understand why that is. But talking of broadcasters leads us on to sponsorship. The Vanarama signed a new sponsorship deal.
Yes.
Is that going to help you in any way financially?
I have absolutely no idea how that pans out for us. I'm not involved in that much detail of the finances. What I will say is that I know that some clubs were certainly tweeting at Vanarama to try and get them to bring some influence. So there was some were a little bit disappointed to see them signing a big new deal, 3-year deal, because that didn't change anything. I mean, the way it works is that the chunks of the money, and usually the voting power goes to the top division. And, they're the ones, same with the TV money, obviously they're the ones who get shown on TV occasionally. We don't, so I understand how that works. But I have no idea what we see of that Panorama money.
Kieran, do you know how much Chippenham Town would expect to get out of that Vanarama deal? Can you put a specific figure?
We've not got the actual numbers from the National League, so I can't say per club.
Right, but how much will the league be getting, do you know, from the Vanarama deal?
We're not talking big numbers. If they're getting 6 figures, they're actually doing quite well.
Okay. Finally, Martin, I'm going to ask you to finish in a moment with a message to the National League. But you mentioned being the COVID officer at the club. Do you think at the start of next season, if we are still all three, if there hasn't been another mutant variant from Mars that we had no idea was going to happen, do you think people will be going back into grounds in September, your ground in particular, as though nothing had happened, with no social distancing, no sanitisers, etc.? Or do you think, with your COVID officer hat, that that's something we'll have to put up with, I suppose, for want of a better word, for seasons to come?
That may have to be put up with for a while. I think it's very difficult to second guess it because there's a lot of speed bumps in the way of going along that roadmap. So at the moment, I think we're only psychologically allowing for the idea of it operating like we did on Boxing Day, which worked very well, where we had ticketing in advance so that we got all the track and trace details quickly and easily to process people on the day, that much quicker. We had the social distancing. It's all in place for it. We can always make it less socially distanced, but we're all ready to rock as it is. So we've got all our plans in place. I mean, there will be some, I don't know, the elderly supporters who've been jabbed may be quite happy to come along. It may be some of the younger ones aren't happy to come along. We'll just cross that hurdle when we, cross that hurdle? Well, never mind. When we come to it.
Yeah, we can cross that hurdle when we cross that hurdle, Martin. That's fine. You can do whatever you want.
Just quickly draw attention to one sentence in their ruling, which is fascinating.
Of course,
that clock was going to do. It says about the future funding. It says grant funding from Camelot of 30k a month for October, November, December had enabled the season to start. However, it became apparent at the end of December that future funding would not be guaranteed in the form of grants. The likelihood was that loans would be made available to clubs. The panel believed, this is the independent panel, believed the information given by the league at the outset was a genuine misunderstanding and the league board did not deliberately mislead its clubs. Interesting choice of words, I think, because obviously they stress them deliberately, but they're not really denying they misled us.
That is interesting, isn't it? It's very similar to the ruling on Nicola Sturgeon. There's misleading and there's deliberately misleading, but yeah, that's just bizarre thing about football, Martin, as we discuss all the time. In any other business, anybody who misled the members of their association will be answering for it. But in football, it doesn't happen. We do have to finish up. This was technically meant to be a short interview because it's questions day. No, it's my fault, and I knew the subject wouldn't lend itself to a short interview. But can you finish, Martin, if possible, with just a clear, unequivocal message to the National League about your situation?
Right. The clear message about our situation is that we made the only decision we possibly could for the sustainability of the club. We are not prepared to bankrupt a club that was founded in 1873. We wish this club to still be here, in the years to come for the future generations and for this community. We are not happy with the way things are. We will pursue all options available to us. We will discuss with other clubs how best to do that. And if they think it's over, it isn't.
Martin, that's wonderful. For what it's worth, you have the full support of this podcast, and I guess 99% of the people listening to it. If there's anything we can do to help in the future with that appeal, if there's any information you want us to get out, then we will, of course, do that.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Martin's a very articulate man, Kieran. I know Martin. He drinks in the Parsons Arms before Palace games. He's on the side of the Angels, but you can sense the frustration and the disappointment and the anger. And it's something, as an outsider, Kieran, it just seems to me that the National League seems to be bending over backwards to mismanage this situation the whole way through. And this whole idea that they're pretending it's not them, it's this independent panel, and the independent panel are really sorry about this, but we have to take loads of money away from you, and we know you can't afford it because that's why you didn't play the games in the first place. It must be so infuriating for anybody involved with football at that level.
It goes beyond any form of common sense. We're in the middle of the world's biggest health challenge for a century, and under unusual times, you take a look at the big picture, and the big picture is that we all have our football clubs. Those in the National League, sort of lower levels than the National League, that all those matches have been abandoned, and that everybody's gone on fine with that. The clubs who decided not to fulfil their fixtures did so because they want to be able to go and play matches in front of fans in 12 months' time. Again, we've been saying, why are these people involved in the game in the first place? Just because they love football. And if you love football, you want your team to be in existence. What the National League is doing is now threatening their financial security and their potential existence. It makes no logical sense.
And we will, again, through Producer Guy, ask the National League if they want to come and chat to us, because we will happily listen to their version of the story. I imagine we will ask in vain, but until that time, we will keep asking, because we're nice, sensible people. We want to hear both sides of the story, and it just occurs to me that there are probably people at the National League who are unsettled by what they're having to do, and that's why they're claiming it's an independent panel of people that we don't know about. Kieran, our final question, and I kept this question finally deliberately because it's a cracker. In fact, it's more of a question than a documentary. I think we could make a program. It comes from Robert Webster, and Robert says, given the name of the podcast, I was wondering what the price of football actually is for supporters. I've seen surveys giving annual snapshots, but what does this amount to over a lifetime of following a club? Could Kieran fire up a spreadsheet? Could he? And calculate what either he and or Kevin have actually spent on following football down the years: tickets, travel, programmes, pies, replica shirts, TV subscriptions, etc., and roll that forward to give a current value. It's a great question, and I'm almost dreading the answer again. But I suppose you could do two sets of figures: money you have to spend, i.e. tickets and travel, and then money you don't have to spend: beers, pies, cabs back from Watford because you missed the last train, etc. But on a conservative effort, I must have seen 800 Palace games, thinking back to from when I was a kid. I dread to think what I've spent in that time watching Palace.
Right, well, I hope Mrs. Day isn't listening to this part of the podcast.
How long have you known? You've known her for an hour and a half. She's not listening to any part of the podcast. You can say that. You can take that as a given.
So what I've done, I've based this on having a season ticket at a club, travelling to 15 matches a season, doing 15 away trips, getting a programme. I know people don't buy programmes. Having a subscription. I know we've now gone beyond the age at which we buy kit, but buying one shirt a season, because over a lifetime, when you're young, you'll be buying the homes and the ways. And then when it comes, I know you said we shouldn't, or is it discretionary spending? My mate Mike, who I always have a very high regard for. When we're going for an away game, he says, this is away to we're away to Liverpool. This is a critical game towards the end of the season. I'm nervous, and therefore it's a minimum of a 6-pinter. And if you're at home against Burton Albion, it's only a 3-pinter. You know that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to, and it makes no difference to me, of course. But it's sometimes to help calm the nerves, to get yourself in the right mental framework before a game. So I've worked on the basis of that, and you can't go to a match without eat and drink. We're not monks.
Yeah.
And I've also factored in some 4 cup matches a season as well. I've tried to be as detailed as I can. And the total, and this is domestic only, because again I've got some of my mates who follow England home and away. I've got friends who support United and Liverpool, and they go to all the European games. But so excluding that, purely domestic, over the course of your lifetime, £245,700.
No.
Yeah.
Wow. Not only am I pleased that Ali doesn't listen to this, but occasionally she'll say, "What did you talk about today?" I go, "Oh, some kid keeps getting sent off." 245
costs his family a fortune.
245, and that's that notion of only having 3 pints before a game that doesn't matter. I mean, that doesn't compute for a start off. £245,000. That's just one, because a mate of mine takes his boys virtually every away game. So you can add 2/3. Well, they're both old enough to drink. One of them is, but that's a lot. That's a much more than I thought. That's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's also worth every penny, Kevin.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just thinking about my bank manager asking me recently if I could justify all my expenses. Like, well, apart from £245, that's £1,000. That's I knew this is a good question, but that's very interesting. I'd like to hear from listeners actually about what their peripheral spending on match days, because there must be some people who are able to walk to the ground, just go in and just spend their money on a ticket. But wow, that's taken me aback a little. But that's gone right back to episode 2 and 3 eyebrow raising days, Kieran. Really? Anyway. Okay. Well,
if you think about it, how much is your Sky and BT subscriptions, your season tickets? You put in a few big trips. You're going up north and so on. And I did this on the basis of I just said on average it'll be a trip from say London to Birmingham for your away games, and you work out how much it's costing you on a match day, Kevin. It's
no, I don't think I will. Yeah, well,
no, that's not too.
But so that's the other thing. When does match day stop? I mean, that Chinese I get when I'm coming home at 9 o'clock from Cellar, does that count? Is that match day spending, or is it just?
I'm finishing at 5 o'clock here in terms of.
Oh, God, so we can have
so it's only pre and during match drinking. And food.
Oh my God! So you can probably add another £100,000 on top of that. And if you're a Newcastle fan or a Plymouth fan, you probably can add another £50,000 travelling. Good Lord. Robert, thank you for that question. Thank you, everybody, for your question. One more thing to mention, Kieran, and I'm going into reading mode now, as I suspect people will realise. We have a Patreon page. We've held off until now because we always plan to generate income through sponsorship and advertising rather than you. However, so many of you have been in touch to ask how to make a small regular donation. Have they, Guy? Have they? That we, in inverted commas, have decided to go for it. Am I making it plain enough that this is Guy's idea, Kieran? I think I am. This is good. So if you'd like to make a small donation to help us keep going and put on live events, that's a new development, Kieran. Did you have any idea we were doing live events?
We are live. Yeah.
We're not. This is Sunday morning, so don't be don't be misleading people we're trying to get £2 a month out of. If you're waiting with bated breath for those live events and a free mug, please feel free to go to patreon.com/price of football, and you get treats. Apparently, you get treats according to. I think you can only spend £2 or £3. I can't stress enough to all our dear listeners that it will always be free, this podcast. We will never, ever charge you for listening to this. I don't think we'd have the gall to charge people just to listen to this, Kieran, would we? But if you do want to, if you are one of those apparently thousands of people that have been in touch to ask how to make a small regular donation, then that would be lovely. I'm not saying we wouldn't like the money, because clearly we've been in a lockdown and furniture shops haven't been open. So Guy is itching, he's chafing at the bit even to get into IKEA for when has IKEA been open? It probably has. I don't know. But if you do want to donate, it's where have I put it now? I've already crossed it out. Remember? Patreon.com.
Patreon.com/price of football.
Yeah, and that's the level of competent presenting that you get if you want to. And of course, as always, if you have any questions for us about any area of football finance, it's questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall leave you in the capable hands of Kieran. And who knows, if you become a patron, you might even get a special unedited version of Kieran's goodbye.
in Russian.
Not that special. You'd have to spend a lot more than £2 a month to get that. I've been trying to prize the full details of that out of you for 18 months.
I could try to get hold of Tatiana again and get her to say what she used to say to me after special cuddles.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, you could.
That's worth a £5 of anybody's money a month, I can assure you.
Yeah, by which I can gather that the Baroness is not listening to this podcast.
That's correct. Well, thank you once again for your reviews, folks. They do make us smile, and especially as they all seem to be about how much the show belongs to producer Guy, and without myself and Kevin, it would actually probably be better. Thanks all for all the support. If you could give us a 5-star review on the Apple podcast, it does make a difference towards Guy, according to Guy, as it helps us in the charts and it helps us to have some credibility. And I know there's not very much in terms of when we're trying to book guests and arrange sponsors and things of that nature. Other than that, look after yourselves.
I told you he'd get loads more 5-star reviews, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
You barely hear a peep out of him all week, and then suddenly it's like Ireland losing to Luxembourg last night. Suddenly the WhatsApp group's pinging away with, oh, here's another 5-star review I haven't seen to mention to you. It's infuriating. Bye, everybody.
The price of football. The price of football.